There are moments in life when everything changes so quietly that you don't even hear it happen. For me, it happened on a rainy Tuesday morning in early October. The coffee maker hissed in the kitchen of our little house in Cedar Grove, Ohio. Rain tapped gently against the windows while the smell of fresh coffee filled the room. It should have felt comforting. Instead, the silence between my wife and me seemed louder than the storm outside. My name is Daniel Harper, and at 46 years old, I believed I understood what love looked like. I was wrong. Emily and I had been married for 23 years. We met during our freshman year at Ohio State University. She laughed at one of my terrible jokes in the campus library, and from that moment on, I spent every excuse I could think of just to see her smile again. She was the kind of woman who noticed lonely people at parties, the kind who remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders, the kind who cried during Christmas movies even after watching them 5 times. When we married, everyone said we'd grow old together. I believed them. We built a simple life, nothing glamorous. I worked as a project manager for a construction company. Emily taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school. We raised 2 amazing children. Our son, Tyler, was 21 and studying engineering in Michigan. Our daughter, Sophie, had just started college in Chicago. For the first time in over 2 decades, the house was empty. Everyone had warned us about the empty nest. Nobody warned us what happened when 2 strangers were left standing in it. Emily placed a white envelope beside my coffee mug. "I think you should read this after breakfast." Her voice was calm. Too calm. She grabbed her school bag and walked toward the front door. "You're leaving already?" I asked. "I have parent conferences." She didn't look at me. She simply nodded. Then she left. The front door closed with a soft click. I stared at the envelope. My name was written across the front in her familiar handwriting. Daniel. Nothing more. For 10 minutes, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Finally, I slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside were 3 sheets of paper. The first sentence stopped my heart. "I want a divorce." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. I read the sentence again. Then again. My hands began shaking. The words blurred together. Emily wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing me of cheating. She wasn't blaming another woman. Instead, she wrote something far more painful. "I don't think you even know who I am anymore." I spent the next hour reading the letter over and over. She described years of loneliness. Years of eating dinner across from a husband whose eyes were always on his phone. Years of conversations interrupted by work emails. Years of canceled date nights. Forgotten anniversaries. Broken promises. She wrote, "You never stopped providing for our family, Daniel. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being my partner." That sentence hurt because it was true. I had convinced myself that paying bills, fixing the roof, working overtime, keeping food on the table, that those things were love. Maybe they were. But they weren't all love needed to survive. At the bottom of the letter, she wrote, "I'm moving into my sister Laura's house this weekend. My lawyer will send the paperwork soon." No anger. No shouting. Just finality. I don't remember driving to work that morning. I barely remembered parking. My best friend Marcus noticed immediately. "You look terrible." I handed him the letter. He read it without speaking. Finally, he sighed. "When was the last time you 2 went somewhere together?" "I don't know." "When was the last time you asked Emily how she was doing?" "And actually listened?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Marcus nodded slowly. "I figured." He folded the letter. "You know what the scary part is?" "What?" "She doesn't sound angry anymore." "What does that mean?" "It means she stopped hoping." Those words hit harder than the divorce itself. Because I suddenly realized Emily hadn't written this letter overnight. She'd probably been writing it in her heart for years. That evening, I came home to an almost silent house. Emily wasn't there. She'd stayed late at school. For the first time in years, I looked around. Really looked. Family pictures lined the hallway. Vacation photos. Birthday parties. Christmas mornings. In every picture, Emily was smiling. But then I noticed something strange. The newer the photo, the smaller her smile became. How had I never seen that before? I walked into our bedroom. Her side of the closet was half empty. She had already started packing. My chest tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried harder than I had since my father died. Not because she wanted to leave, because I finally understood why. Emily came home after 8. She quietly placed groceries on the counter. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, I whispered, "I read your letter." She nodded. "I figured. Can we talk?" She leaned against the kitchen island. "We've been avoiding talking for years, Daniel." "I know." "No," she said softly. "You don't." There was no hatred in her eyes, only exhaustion. "I spent years telling you I missed you." "I know." "You always said next month would be better." I lowered my head. "I know." "You always promised we'd take that weekend trip." "I know." "You always said work would slow down." I couldn't answer, because it never had. Emily looked at me for a long moment. "I don't think you're a bad man." That somehow hurt even more. "I think you're a good man who slowly forgot the woman standing beside him." Tears filled my eyes. "I'm sorry." She smiled sadly. "I believe you." "Then don't leave." I wish an apology could fix 10 years. Silence. Rain tapped against the windows again. Finally, she whispered, "I'm just tired." That night we slept in the same bed, but it felt like miles separated us. Around midnight, I heard quiet crying. Emily thought I was asleep. I almost reached for her hand. Almost. Instead, I lay perfectly still, the same way I'd done for years. Only this time, I realized my silence had become its own kind of betrayal. The next morning, Emily left before sunrise. When I walked into the kitchen, another envelope sat beside the coffee maker. For one terrifying second, I thought it was another goodbye letter. Instead, it was an old photograph. Our honeymoon, 23 years earlier. On the back, Emily had written just one sentence. "Do you remember the promise we made that day?" I stared at the picture for a long time. I remembered. We had stood on a beach in South Carolina, barefoot in the sand, promising each other one simple thing. No matter how busy life gets, we'll never stop choosing each other. Somewhere between careers, mortgage payments, soccer games, college tuition, and endless responsibilities, I'd stopped choosing her, and I hadn't even noticed. As I turned the photograph over one more time, something slipped from behind it. It was an old, yellowed envelope addressed to Emily in handwriting I didn't recognize. There was no stamp, no return address. Only 4 words written across the front. "Open this together." I frowned. Emily had never mentioned this letter. My pulse quickened. Who had written it? And why had it been hidden all these years? Daniel stood frozen in the kitchen, the old yellowed envelope trembling in his hands. The paper felt brittle, as though it had been waiting decades for this exact moment. Across the front, in faded blue ink, were the words, "Open this together." There was no signature, no date, no return address. Just those 3 words, and suddenly 100 questions. He almost opened it right then. Almost. But something stopped him. The message wasn't "open this." It was "open this together." For the first time in years, Daniel realized he wanted to honor something instead of rushing through it. He slipped the envelope into his jacket pocket and drove to work, though he barely noticed the road. The day crawled by. Emails piled up. Meetings came and went. Co-workers spoke, but their voices sounded distant. His mind kept returning to Emily's face the night before. Not angry, not bitter, just empty. Marcus found him sitting alone in the break room. "You haven't touched your lunch." "I'm not hungry." Daniel placed the old envelope on the table. Marcus picked it up carefully. "What's this?" "I found it behind an old honeymoon photo." Marcus turned it over. "Open this together." He looked at Daniel. "You going to?" "I don't think I should without Emily." Marcus smiled faintly. "That might be the smartest decision you've made in a long time." Daniel couldn't even argue. When work ended, he didn't drive straight home. Instead, he stopped at a small florist. The young woman behind the counter smiled. "What can I help you with?" Daniel stared at the rows of flowers. He suddenly realized something painful. He couldn't remember Emily's favorite. 23 years of marriage. And he couldn't remember. Embarrassed, he admitted it. "My wife loves flowers. but I forgot which ones. The florist didn't laugh. Instead, she asked gently, "What kind did you buy when you first dated?" Daniel closed his eyes. A memory appeared. A tiny flower stand outside the university library. Emily laughing because he couldn't afford roses. So he'd bought a handful of white daisies instead. She'd smiled like he'd handed her diamonds. Daniel swallowed hard. Daisies! The florist wrapped a simple bouquet. No fancy ribbon? She smiled. Sometimes simple is exactly what's needed. Emily was already home when Daniel arrived. Boxes sat near the hallway. She had begun packing books. The sight made his chest tighten. Without saying a word, he placed the daisies on the kitchen counter. Emily looked surprised. Then she smiled. A tiny smile. The first real one he'd seen in months. You remembered. Daniel shook his head. I didn't. Her smile faded. I had to ask someone. For a moment, embarrassment filled the room. Then Emily did something unexpected. She laughed. A soft, genuine laugh. You know, she said. At least you told the truth. Daniel almost cried hearing that laugh. He'd forgotten how beautiful it sounded. After dinner, he placed the yellow envelope between them. I found this behind our honeymoon picture. Emily frowned. I've never seen that before. You didn't hide it? She shook her head. Slowly. No. They stared at it together. Neither spoke. Finally, Emily whispered, It says to open it together. Daniel nodded. So, she reached across the table. For just a second. Their fingers touched. The warmth of her hand felt strangely unfamiliar, as if they'd become strangers learning each other all over again. Daniel carefully opened the envelope. Inside rested a single folded letter. The handwriting matched the envelope. Emily unfolded it. Her voice trembled as she began reading. If you're reading this together, congratulations. That means you've already survived the hardest years of marriage. Daniel and Emily looked at one another. Emily continued, Right now you're probably older than you were when I wrote this. Maybe you're tired. Maybe life became busier than you imagined. Maybe you've forgotten why you fell in love. Daniel felt goosebumps. Every word landed like it had been written yesterday. I'm writing this because my wife and I almost divorced. After 20 years together, Emily's voice caught. We blamed money. We blamed work. We blamed stress. But the truth was much simpler. We stopped noticing each other. Silence filled the kitchen. Daniel could hear only the ticking clock. Emily kept reading. One day my wife told me something I'll never forget. She said, I don't need a perfect husband. I just need to know I still matter to you. Daniel closed his eyes. Those words sounded exactly like Emily's letter. If your marriage is healthy, put this letter away and never think about it again. But if your marriage is hanging by a thread, please don't make permanent decisions before spending 30 days choosing each other again. Emily stopped reading. Neither moved. Neither breathed. Daniel whispered, There's more. She nodded. For the next 30 days, eat one meal together, take one walk every week, ask one honest question every night, listen without defending yourself. Remember the person before you remember the problem. At the end of 30 days, if you still want to walk away knowing you truly tried. You'll never regret giving love one last honest chance. Signed simply, a husband who almost lost everything. Emily folded the letter carefully. I don't know who wrote this. Neither do I. Silence returned. Finally, Daniel spoke. I'm asking for 30 days. Emily stared at him. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've broken promises before. But this time, he struggled to hold back tears. I don't want to save our marriage because I'm afraid of being alone. I want to save it because I finally remember who I'm supposed to be. Emily looked down at the letter. Her eyes filled with tears. I've waited a long time to hear that. I know. She took a deep breath. 30 days. Daniel blinked. What? I'll give us 30 days. Hope rushed into his chest so suddenly it almost hurt. But understand something. She looked directly into his eyes. This isn't about flowers. It isn't about romantic dinners. It isn't about grand gestures. It's about whether you can become present again. Daniel nodded immediately. I'll do whatever it takes. Emily answered quietly. Then tomorrow, we start. That night, for the first time in months, neither of them slept well. Not because they were growing farther apart, but because, after years of silence, hope had quietly returned. Neither of them knew that the mysterious letter was only the beginning. Because 2 days later, Daniel would receive a phone call from an elderly attorney who would reveal who wrote the letter and why it had been waiting more than 20 years to find them. The truth would change everything they believed about love, forgiveness, and second chances. The next morning felt different. Not magically better. Just different. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't checking work emails before sunrise. Instead, he stood in the kitchen making pancakes. The first batch burned. The second was undercooked. The third looked almost edible. Emily walked downstairs, stopping halfway when she caught the smell. You made breakfast? Daniel smiled awkwardly. I may have started a small war with the frying pan. For a split second, the corner of Emily's mouth lifted. I can see that. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it wasn't silence either. It was a beginning. Remembering the letter, Daniel put his phone on the kitchen counter and turned it face down. Emily noticed. No phone? He shook his head. No distractions. They ate quietly for a few minutes. Then Daniel remembered the first challenge from the letter. Ask one honest question every night. He decided to start now. Can I ask you something? Emily nodded. When did you first start feeling alone? She stared at her coffee for a long time. When Sophie was in middle school? Daniel frowned. That long ago? Emily nodded slowly. I remember one Friday night. She looked out the window. I made your favorite lasagna. You called and said another meeting came up. Daniel closed his eyes. He remembered that meeting. At least, he remembered thinking it was important. I ate alone, Emily continued softly. The kids had already eaten. I told myself it was okay. She smiled sadly. Then the same thing happened the next week. And the week after that? Daniel couldn't speak. I stopped making lasagna after that. His heart sank. Lasagna had disappeared from their dinner table years ago. He had never even wondered why. That afternoon, Daniel was sitting at his desk when his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. Hello? A gentle elderly voice answered. Is this Daniel Harper? Yes. My name is William Brooks. I'm an attorney. Daniel's stomach tightened. Was this the divorce lawyer? I believe you and your wife recently found a letter. Daniel froze. His pulse quickened. How do you know about that? There was a pause. Because my late client asked me to call you, if that letter was ever opened. Daniel stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward. What? It has been 23 years. I've been waiting a very long time to make this phone call. Daniel left work early. An hour later, he sat inside a quiet law office across from William Brooks. The attorney looked to be in his late 70s. His desk held a single framed photograph of an elderly couple smiling on a porch swing. William noticed Daniel looking, my wife. He smiled. 52 years. Daniel smiled politely, then asked the only question on his mind. Who wrote the letter? William carefully opened a small file. The man's name was Thomas Whitaker. Daniel shook his head. I don't know him. I didn't expect you would. William removed another envelope. When Thomas and his wife renewed their wedding vows 23 years ago, he decided to write 10 letters. Each letter was meant for couples he believed might one day need them. Daniel looked confused. How would he know who needed them? He didn't. He simply asked friends, churches, photographers, and wedding planners to secretly place the letters inside wedding albums, honeymoon keepsakes, or family memory boxes. Daniel stared in disbelief. So ours was hidden behind your honeymoon photograph. William nodded. Exactly. But why? William smiled. Because Thomas believed something. What? He believed almost every marriage reaches a moment when one person quietly gives up. Daniel felt chills. William handed Daniel a worn leather journal. Thomas left this for couples who actually opened the first letter. Daniel carefully opened it. The first page read, Love doesn't disappear in one day. It disappears one unnoticed moment at a time. Daniel swallowed hard. William continued, Thomas and his wife nearly divorced after 20 years. What saved them wasn't counseling. It wasn't money. It wasn't a vacation. It was learning to notice each other again. Daniel slowly turned another page. Inside were handwritten stories. Little moments. Simple acts of kindness. Holding hands during chemotherapy. Sharing coffee before sunrise. Laughing over burned pancakes. Daniel smiled. Burned pancakes. This morning. William leaned forward. Thomas asked me to give you one piece of advice. Daniel looked up. What is it? Don't try to become the husband you think Emily wants. Become the husband she once trusted. Those words settled deeply inside him. Before leaving, William handed him one final sealed envelope. What's this? Thomas instructed me not to give this to anyone unless both husband and wife completed 30 days together. Daniel turned the envelope over. Written across the front were the words, Day 30. Daniel smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. That evening, Daniel told Emily everything. She listened quietly. When he finished, she asked, Do you believe all this happened by coincidence? Daniel looked at the journal. I don't know, but I know we've been given something we didn't deserve. A second chance. Emily nodded slowly. I've spent years believing our story was ending. She looked toward the family photographs on the wall. Maybe it's still being written. That night they took their first walk together. No destination, just around the neighborhood. The autumn air was cool. Leaves crunched beneath their shoes. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Emily pointed toward an old maple tree. Remember when Tyler climbed that tree? Daniel laughed. And got stuck. You climbed up to rescue him. I got stuck too. Emily laughed. A real laugh. Daniel found himself laughing with her. An elderly couple walking their dog smiled as they passed. Beautiful evening, the man said. It is, Daniel replied. For the first time in years, he truly meant it. When they returned home, Emily noticed something unusual. Daniel's laptop bag was sitting by the front door. Closed. You didn't work tonight? He shook his head. It can wait until tomorrow. She studied him carefully. You've said that before. I know. But this time, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, turned it completely off, then placed it inside a kitchen drawer. I'm done letting this decide who gets my attention. Emily didn't say anything. She simply watched him. Hope is a fragile thing. She wasn't ready to believe. But for the first time in years, she wanted to. Just before bed, Daniel opened Thomas Whitaker's journal again. Tucked inside the back cover was a small folded note he hadn't noticed before. It wasn't written by Thomas. It was written by someone else. The handwriting was shaky. The ink had faded. It read, If Daniel and Emily ever read this, tell them I'm sorry I never had the courage to say the truth. Daniel's blood ran cold. He turned the note over. There was a signature. A name he recognized instantly. A name neither he nor Emily had spoken in nearly 15 years. Michael Harper. Daniel's older brother. The same brother who had vanished from the family's life after one devastating Thanksgiving. The same brother no one had heard from since. And somehow, he knew Daniel and Emily. He knew about the letter. And he was apologizing for something Daniel didn't yet understand. Daniel stared at the signature until the words blurred. Michael Harper. His older brother. The man who had disappeared from the family's life 15 years earlier. Emily looked up from her book when she saw the color drain from Daniel's face. Daniel, what is it? Without saying a word, he handed her the note. She read it once. Then again, her eyes widened. Michael? Daniel nodded slowly. I don't understand. Neither do I. Emily sat beside him on the couch. We haven't heard his name in years. No, the silence between them wasn't awkward this time. It was filled with questions. Michael had always been Daniel's hero growing up. 5 years older, he had taught Daniel how to ride a bike, throw a baseball, and stand up to bullies. When Daniel was 16, Michael had even worked 2 extra jobs to help pay for Daniel's first used car after their father lost his job. To Daniel, Michael wasn't just a brother. He was family at its best. Then everything changed. 15 years ago, their mother died after a long battle with cancer. Grief hit everyone differently. Daniel buried himself in work. His father became quiet. And Michael disappeared. After one painful Thanksgiving dinner filled with arguments over their parents' estate, Michael packed a suitcase and walked out. No phone calls. No Christmas cards. No birthdays. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished. The next morning, Daniel called William Brooks. I found another note. The attorney was silent for a moment. I wondered when you'd discover it. You knew? I knew it was there. Why didn't you tell me? Because Thomas asked me not to. Daniel rubbed his forehead. How did my brother know Thomas? William sighed. They met at a veteran support group. My brother was a veteran? Yes. Daniel felt another wave of guilt. He hadn't even known. William continued softly. Michael carried a great deal of pain. He often spoke about his younger brother. Daniel's throat tightened. He did? He loved you very much. Daniel closed his eyes. Then why did he leave? I'm afraid that's a story only Michael could fully tell. There was another pause. But before he passed away, he asked Thomas to make sure that if your marriage was ever in danger, you would receive that first letter. Daniel's heart stopped. Passed away? William's voice broke. Michael died 3 years ago. Daniel couldn't breathe. 3 years. His brother had been gone for 3 years. And he hadn't even known. He sank into the chair. I missed his funeral. I'm sorry. Tears rolled down Daniel's face. So am I. That evening, Daniel told Emily everything. She covered her mouth in shock. Oh, Daniel. I didn't even know he was gone. Emily reached across the table and gently held his hand. This time, neither of them pulled away. For several minutes, they simply sat together, grieving. Not just Michael, but the years they had all lost. The following Saturday, Daniel and Emily drove to the small town where Michael had spent his final years. William had given them the address. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even a large home. Just a small white cottage with a wooden porch. An elderly woman answered the door. You must be Daniel. He blinked. You know who I am? She smiled kindly. I'm Margaret. I was Michael's neighbor. Her eyes filled with tears. He talked about you almost every week. Daniel's voice cracked. He did? Oh, yes. He always said, my little brother is a good man. Daniel looked down. I haven't been much of one lately. Margaret shook her head. Michael never believed that. She invited them inside. The cottage was simple but warm. Family photos covered the walls. To Daniel's surprise, there were pictures of him. Old ones. One showed the brothers fishing as teenagers. Another showed Daniel holding baby Tyler while Michael smiled beside him. Margaret noticed Daniel staring. He kept every picture. Daniel wiped away another tear. I thought he hated me. Oh, honey. She smiled sadly. He never hated you? He just didn't know how to come home. Margaret disappeared into another room and returned carrying a worn wooden box. Michael wanted you to have this. Daniel slowly opened it. Inside were dozens of letters. Everyone addressed to him. None had ever been mailed. Emily whispered. They're all for you. The first letter was dated 14 years earlier. Daniel carefully unfolded it. Dear Danny, I picked up the phone today to call you. I hung up before it rang. I didn't know if you'd even want to hear my voice. Daniel's vision blurred. Another letter. Happy birthday. I hope Tyler still likes baseball. Another. Tell Emily I'm sorry I missed your anniversary. Another. One day I'll come home. But he never had. At the bottom of the wooden box was one final envelope. It was sealed. Across the front, Michael had written, Open this only if you ever think love isn't worth fighting for. Daniel looked at Emily. Slowly, she nodded. He opened it. Inside was a single page. Danny, if you're reading this, something precious is slipping away. Don't repeat my mistake. Pride stole 15 years from me. I kept waiting for the perfect time to say I was sorry. The perfect time never came. Love isn't lost in one argument. It's lost in all the conversations we never have. If Emily is still beside you, turn toward her. Don't wait another day, because someday, one of you won't have another tomorrow. Tell her she's worth fighting for. Do it while she's still there to hear it. Love always. Michael. Daniel couldn't hold back his tears. Neither could Emily. For the first time in years, she wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly. Neither spoke. Some moments don't need words. As they prepared to leave, Margaret stopped them. There's one more thing. She handed Daniel a small brass key. What does it open? Margaret smiled through her tears. I don't know. Michael only said, when Daniel is finally ready to become the husband Emily deserves, he'll know where this belongs. Daniel turned the old key over in his hand. It was engraved with 2 tiny initials, D and E, and on the other side, one date, their wedding day. Daniel held the small brass key all the way home. He turned it over in his fingers again and again. Nay, their initials, their wedding date. But what did it unlock? Emily glanced at the key from the passenger seat. Does it remind you of anything? Daniel shook his head. I wish it did. For the first time in years, they spent the drive talking, not about bills, work, or schedules, but about memories. The first apartment they rented. The secondhand couch they couldn't fit through the doorway. The night the electricity went out. And they ate peanut butter sandwiches by candlelight, laughing until midnight. Somewhere along the highway, Daniel realized something. The happiest memories of their marriage had almost nothing to do with money. They had everything to do with being together. The next morning was day 7 of their 30-day promise. Emily was getting ready for school when she found Daniel sitting on the living room floor. Old photo albums surrounded him. What are you doing? I'm looking. For what? I don't know yet. She smiled. That's not very helpful. He laughed. It sounded better in my head. For the next hour, they flipped through albums together. There were birthday parties, camping trips, Christmas mornings. Then they found an old picture from their wedding reception. Daniel stared at the background. Behind them was a small wooden chest sitting on a table. His eyes widened. Wait! Emily leaned closer. The memory box? She gasped. I forgot all about it. The memory came rushing back. On their wedding day, the pastor had given them a small cedar box. Inside, they had placed handwritten letters to each other. The pastor had smiled and said, Lock this away. Open it only if your marriage is ever in danger. Daniel looked at Emily. Did we ever open it? She shook her head. I don't think so. Where is it? They searched the attic, the garage, every closet. After nearly an hour, Daniel pulled aside an old Christmas decoration. Behind it sat a dusty cedar chest, exactly as it had looked 23 years earlier. His heart pounded. There was only one problem. It was locked. Emily slowly looked at the brass key in Daniel's hand. It can't be. Daniel knelt beside the chest. He slid the key into the lock. Click. The lock opened instantly. Neither of them spoke. The room felt sacred, as though time itself had been waiting for this moment. Inside the cedar box were 2 envelopes, one addressed to Emily, the other to Daniel. Both were written in their own younger handwriting. There was also a small cassette tape. Emily laughed through her tears. We actually made a recording? Daniel smiled. I completely forgot. They found an old cassette player in the basement. Miraculously, it still worked. Daniel pressed play. Static filled the room. Then 2 young voices burst through the speaker. Their own, 23 years younger. They were laughing, teasing each other, dreaming out loud. Young Daniel said, If we're listening to this someday, I hope we're still crazy about each other. Young Emily laughed. And if we're fighting, stop being stubborn, Daniel. Present-day Daniel smiled through tears. I haven't changed much. Emily gently nudged him. No, you haven't. Then the recording became serious. Young Emily spoke softly. Promise me something. Young Daniel answered. Anything. If life ever becomes so busy that we stop talking, come find me. Don't assume I'll always know you love me, young Daniel replied without hesitation. I promise. The tape clicked to an end. Silence filled the room. Daniel covered his face. I broke that promise. Emily reached for his hand. Yes, but you're here now. They opened the letters. Daniel unfolded the one written by 23-year-old Emily. Dear future Daniel, If you're reading this, we've probably been married for a long time. I don't care if our house is big or small. I don't care if we're rich. I only hope that when I walk into a room, your face still lights up because I'm there. Daniel couldn't stop crying. He remembered how excited he used to be just to see her after class. When had that changed? Emily opened Daniel's letter. Her hands trembled. Dear future Emily, if I ever become too busy to hold your hand, pull me back. If I ever forget to laugh with you, remind me. If I ever make you feel alone, don't give up on me. Emily lowered the page. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She whispered, I tried. Daniel looked at her. I know. I really did. I know. I'm sorry I stopped asking. Daniel wrapped his arms around her. This time, she didn't hesitate. She hugged him back, longer than either expected. That evening, something changed. Not because every wound had healed, but because honesty had finally replaced silence. They ordered pizza, played an old board game, laughed when Daniel lost badly. For a few precious hours, it felt like the early years again. Hope wasn't just returning, it was beginning to grow. Just before bed, Daniel checked the mailbox. Among the bills was a single certified envelope. His stomach tightened. He recognized the law firm's logo. He opened it. Inside were the official divorce papers. Emily walked onto the porch just as he lowered the documents. Neither spoke. The papers fluttered in the evening breeze. After a long silence, Emily quietly said, I told my lawyer to prepare them before we started the 30 days. Daniel nodded. I understand. She looked into his eyes. They're real. I know. But they're not signed. Daniel held the envelope tightly. For the first time since receiving her original letter, he wasn't terrified by the papers. He was terrified of wasting the second chance they had been given. As they stood together on the porch, Daniel noticed something tucked inside the legal envelope that clearly didn't belong there. It was a small handwritten note. Not from the lawyer, not from Emily, just 7 words written in familiar handwriting. Tomorrow, go to the lake at sunrise. Daniel stared at the note. He recognized the handwriting immediately. It matched Michael's. But Michael had been gone for 3 years. Who had placed it there? And how could his brother have known exactly when Daniel would need to read it? Daniel barely slept. Michael's handwritten note rested on the nightstand beside him. Tomorrow, go to the lake at sunrise. He had checked it a dozen times, hoping the handwriting would somehow become unfamiliar. It never did. At 5:15 the next morning, he quietly got dressed. As he reached for his car keys, Emily appeared in the hallway. I couldn't sleep either, she said softly. Daniel held up the note. I'm going. She looked at him for a moment. You're not going alone. The drive to Cedar Lake was silent. Not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. The sky was beginning to glow with shades of orange and pink as they pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. The water was perfectly still. A light mist floated across the surface. Daniel and Emily walked slowly toward the old wooden dock. Halfway there, Daniel noticed someone sitting on a bench. An elderly man wearing a brown jacket and a baseball cap. As they approached, the man stood. You must be Daniel. Daniel frowned. Yes. The man smiled warmly. My name is Samuel Whitaker. Daniel's eyes widened. Whitaker? Samuel nodded. I'm Thomas Whitaker's son. Samuel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. It showed 3 men standing beside this very lake. Thomas Whitaker, Michael Harper, and Samuel? We met here every Saturday morning for almost 6 years, Samuel explained. Your brother rarely missed. Daniel stared at Michael's smiling face. It had been so long since he'd seen that smile. Samuel continued. Michael asked me to meet you here if you ever came. He left something for you. From a canvas bag, Samuel carefully removed an old fishing tackle box. Daniel immediately recognized it. His father had given it to Michael on his 16th birthday. I thought this was lost. So did your brother. Samuel smiled. He found it while moving into the cottage. Inside the tackle box were fishing lures, old photographs, and a folded map of Cedar Lake. A red circle had been drawn around a small wooden pier on the opposite side. Michael had written, "Take Emily here." Samuel pointed across the lake. "That's where your brother proposed to his fiancée." Daniel looked surprised. Michael was engaged? Samuel nodded sadly. Her name was Rebecca. What happened? Cancer. Daniel lowered his head. She passed away 6 months before the wedding. Samuel's voice grew quiet. Michael never stopped loving her. He also never stopped believing in marriage. Emily squeezed Daniel's hand. For the first time, Daniel understood something. Michael hadn't walked away because he stopped believing in family. He walked away because grief convinced him he no longer belonged. Samuel handed Daniel one final envelope. "This is the last thing Michael left with us." On the front it read, "Read this with Emily at the pier." They thanked Samuel and drove around the lake. The little wooden pier looked almost forgotten. Wildflowers grew along the shoreline. A weathered bench faced the water. Daniel and Emily sat together. He opened the envelope. "Dear Danny and Emily, if you're reading this, then you're doing something I never had the courage to do. You're fighting for each other. Please keep fighting. After Rebecca died, I convinced myself love wasn't worth the pain. I isolated myself. I stopped answering calls. I waited for everyone else to come find me. Most people don't know how." Daniel felt tears welling in his eyes. Michael continued, "If there's one thing I've learned, love rarely dies because of one terrible moment. It fades because of thousands of small moments we think don't matter. A kiss goodbye, holding hands, listening without interrupting, laughing together. These little things become the strongest foundation." Emily leaned her head gently against Daniel's shoulder. Neither spoke. They simply listened to the wind moving through the trees. When they returned home, something unexpected happened. Tyler called, "Hey, Dad." Daniel smiled. "Hi, buddy." His son hesitated. "I talked to Mom." Daniel's heart skipped. "Oh?" "She told me about the divorce." Daniel took a deep breath. "We're trying to work things out." There was silence. Then Tyler quietly said, "I hope you do." Daniel frowned. "You knew we were struggling?" Tyler gave a sad laugh. "Dad, I've known for years." Daniel felt another wave of guilt. "You kids noticed?" "Dad, we noticed long before you did." Later that evening, Sophie joined the call from Chicago. She smiled through watery eyes. "You know what I miss?" "What?" Daniel asked. "Family game nights." Emily laughed softly. "You always cheated at Monopoly." "I did not." "You absolutely did," Tyler interrupted. For the next hour, they laughed together over old memories. It wasn't a perfect family, but for the first time in a very long time, it felt like one again. That night, Emily found Daniel sitting on the back porch. "What are you thinking about?" He looked up at the stars. "I spent years trying to build a good life for our family." "You did. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that a good life isn't built only with overtime. It's built with time." Emily sat beside him. Without thinking, their hands found each other. No hesitation, no awkwardness, just quiet comfort. She looked at him. "I've started believing you again." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "A little." She smiled. "And every day, a little more." Inside the house, Daniel noticed something sticking out from Thomas Whitaker's journal. He hadn't seen it before. It was a folded calendar page. 30 small boxes. 29 had tiny handwritten check marks. Only the last box was empty. At the bottom was a note. "On day 30, don't ask whether your marriage has been saved. Ask whether you've become the person your spouse always hoped you could be." Daniel quietly folded the page. Tomorrow would be day 21. 9 days remained. He had no idea whether Emily would sign the divorce papers. But for the first time in years, he wasn't changing to save his marriage. He was changing because it was finally the right thing to do. The final week arrived faster than either of them expected. 21 days had become 22. Then 23. Then 24. For nearly a month, Daniel and Emily had followed the challenge from Thomas Whitaker's letter. They ate meals together. They walked together. They talked honestly. Some conversations were beautiful. Others were painful. But for the first time in years, They were no longer pretending everything was fine. And that made all the difference. On day 25, Emily came home from school carrying a cardboard box. Daniel looked up from the kitchen table. "What's that?" "My classroom." He frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily smiled. "I retired today." Daniel blinked. "You retired?" "I've been planning it for months." He stood up. "Why didn't you tell me?" The moment the words left his mouth, he realized how ironic they sounded. Emily noticed too. For a second, they both stared at each other. Then they laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind that used to fill their home years ago. "I tried to tell you twice," she said. Daniel covered his face. "Of course you did." That evening, they sat on the living room floor sorting through her classroom memories, handmade cards, student drawings, thank you notes. One card caught Daniel's attention. It was from a little girl named Ava. The note read, "Mrs. Harper, thank you for always making us feel seen." Daniel read the sentence twice. Then a third time, Emily noticed. "What is it?" He handed her the card. She smiled softly. She was a sweet kid. Daniel looked at her. "You've spent 30 years making people feel seen." Emily didn't answer. "You did it for your students. For our kids. For friends. For neighbors." His voice cracked. "Everyone except yourself." Emily's eyes filled with tears. And for the first time, Daniel understood something he should have understood years ago. Emily wasn't asking for perfection. She simply wanted someone to notice her the way she noticed everyone else. Day 27 brought another surprise. A package arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo album. Daniel opened it carefully. The first page held a picture of Michael. The next page showed Thomas Whitaker. Then Samuel. Then dozens of other people Daniel had never met. At the front was a letter. "Dear Daniel and Emily, these are the couples whose marriages were touched by Thomas's letters. Some stayed together. Some didn't. But every one of them said the same thing afterward. The greatest gift wasn't saving a marriage. It was learning how to truly see another person again. Whatever happens on day 30, don't lose that lesson. Signed, Samuel Whitaker." That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking. Day 30 was approaching. The divorce papers still sat in the kitchen drawer. Unsigned. Waiting. A decision was coming. And he knew something now that frightened him. Emily might still leave, not because she didn't love him, but because years of hurt don't disappear in 30 days. He had finally accepted something difficult. Love isn't earned by 1 month of effort. It's proven by consistency. On day 28, Daniel received an email from work. A major promotion. The kind he'd chased for years. Higher salary, better title. More responsibility, more travel, more hours. A younger version of Daniel would have accepted within minutes. Instead, he stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. That evening, he told Emily. Her eyes widened. "That's huge." "I know. Are you taking it?" Daniel looked at her, then toward the backyard where the sun was setting. "No." Emily stared. "What?" "I'm turning it down." "Daniel, that's a lot of money." "I know." "Why?" He smiled gently. "Because I've already spent too many years trading time for things that didn't matter." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do that for me." He shook his head. "I'm not." He reached for her hand. "I'm doing it for the man I want to be." Day 29 arrived. Only one day remained. That evening, they took their usual walk. The same neighborhood. The same sidewalks. The same maple tree where Tyler once got stuck. But everything felt different. At one point, Emily stopped walking. Daniel turned. "What is it?" She looked at him for a long moment, then quietly asked, "Do you know what scared me most?" "When I wrote the divorce letter." Daniel shook his head. "No." Emily took a deep breath. "I was afraid you'd fight harder for the marriage than you ever fought for me." The words hit him like a wave. She continued. "I was afraid that losing me would matter more than having me." Daniel's eyes filled instantly. "Emily." "But these past weeks..." Her voice broke. "You weren't trying to stop me from leaving. You were trying to come back." Daniel couldn't speak. He simply pulled her into his arms, and she let him. That night, they sat together on the porch long after dark. Neither wanted to mention tomorrow, but eventually Emily broke the silence. Day 30. Daniel nodded. It's tomorrow. We'll have to decide. I know. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the same way she had when they were newly married. For a while, they watched the stars. Then Daniel remembered something. The final envelope. The one William Brooks had given him weeks ago. The one marked Day 30. He looked at Emily. Tomorrow morning? She smiled softly. Tomorrow morning. As they went inside, Daniel noticed something in the mailbox. One final envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just their names written neatly across the front. Daniel and Emily Harper. He picked it up slowly. The handwriting wasn't Michael's. It wasn't Thomas Whitaker's. And it wasn't anyone they recognized. Yet somehow, both of them felt a strange sense of anticipation. Because tomorrow wasn't just the end of 30 days. It was the day they would finally discover why all of these letters had found their way into their lives, and whether love was truly enough to begin again. The morning of Day 30 arrived quietly. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window as Daniel brewed 2 cups of coffee. Just like he had thousands of mornings before. But this morning was different. The divorce papers were still in the kitchen drawer. The envelope marked Day 30 rested on the table beside the mysterious letter that had arrived the night before. Emily walked into the kitchen. She smiled softly. Good morning. Daniel smiled back. Good morning. Neither of them rushed. Neither of them spoke about the decision waiting ahead. Instead, they sat down together, just as Thomas Whitaker's first letter had asked them to do. Daniel picked up the envelope labeled Day 30. His hands trembled. He opened it carefully. Inside was one final handwritten letter. Emily leaned closer as Daniel began to read aloud. Dear friends, if you've reached Day 30 together, you've already accomplished something extraordinary. Not because you've saved your marriage, but because you've chosen courage over comfort. Many people believe love is a feeling. After 60 years with my wife, I've learned something different. Love is a decision made over and over again. Some mornings it's easy. Some mornings it feels impossible. But every time you choose kindness instead of pride, listening instead of winning, forgiveness instead of keeping score, you're choosing love. Daniel paused, swallowing hard. Emily reached over and gently held his hand. He continued reading. Today, you have only one question to answer. Not whether your spouse is perfect. Not whether the past can be erased. Ask yourself this. If we met again today, knowing everything we know now, would we still choose each other? If the answer is yes, go build a marriage worthy of that choice. If the answer is no, walk away with compassion, knowing you gave love one final honest chance. Either way, don't waste another day taking someone for granted. Life is shorter than you think. At the bottom was Thomas Whitaker's signature. And one final sentence. Love grows where attention goes. Silence filled the kitchen. Daniel looked at Emily. I know my answer. Emily smiled through tears. So do I. Before either of them could speak another word, Daniel remembered the second envelope, the one that had arrived the night before. He opened it. Inside was a short note and a photograph. The photograph showed Thomas Whitaker, Michael Harper, Samuel Whitaker, and several other couples standing together beside Cedar Lake. The note read, If you're reading this, then another marriage found hope. Thomas passed away believing that every restored marriage could inspire another family to keep fighting. In his honor, a bench has been placed at Cedar Lake. The inscription was chosen by Michael Harper. We hope you'll visit it together. Samuel Whitaker. An hour later, Daniel and Emily drove to Cedar Lake one last time. The morning air was cool. The water shimmered beneath the rising sun. Near the old wooden pier stood a newly installed wooden bench. Daniel slowly walked toward it. Carved into the back were simple words. Never stop choosing each other. Beneath it, in smaller letters, in loving memory of Thomas Whitaker and Michael Harper. Daniel could no longer hold back his tears. Neither could Emily. They sat together on the bench in silence. After a few moments, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. He removed the divorce papers. Without saying a word, he looked at Emily. She nodded. Together, they tore the papers into small pieces. The wind carried them away across the lake, not as a denial of the past, but as a promise for the future. Daniel turned toward Emily. I can't promise I'll never make another mistake. Emily smiled. I don't need perfection. I just need you. He took both of her hands. Emily Harper, I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every day I've left. Tears streamed down her face. I choose you too. For the first time in years, they kissed. Not because they were newlyweds, but because they had found each other again. 1 year later, the Harper home looked different. Not because it had been remodeled, because it was full of life again. Every Friday night had become family night. Tyler graduated from engineering school. Sophie accepted her first teaching job, inspired by her mother. Daniel left work every evening by 5 o'clock. No exceptions. He and Emily volunteered at a local marriage ministry, quietly sharing their story with couples who felt hopeless. They never claimed to have a perfect marriage. Instead, Daniel always said the same thing. We almost lost everything. And that's when we finally learned how to love. Every anniversary, they returned to Cedar Lake. They brought white daisies, Emily's favorite. They sat on the bench Michael had helped create. They read Thomas Whitaker's first letter together. And before leaving, they always held hands for one quiet minute. Not speaking, just remembering. Remembering that marriages rarely fail because love disappears overnight. They fail when two people slowly stop choosing each other. If there's one lesson Daniel and Emily hoped others would remember, it was this. Love doesn't survive because life is easy. Love survives because two imperfect people keep turning toward each other even after they've drifted apart. Sometimes one honest conversation can save years of regret. Sometimes one unexpected letter can change everything. And sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't finding new love. It's rediscovering the love that was there all along. The end. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone you love, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us continue creating heartfelt stories that inspire hope, forgiveness, and second chances. Thank you for being part of our family.